He told me that when he was having sex with me, he was thinking about her. I read those words on his laptop screen at 9 in the morning on a Friday, and I felt the floor of my entire life tilt sideways. Let me back up, because to understand how I ended up sitting at his kitchen table with my coffee going cold and my hands shaking, you have to understand who I was before that morning. My name is Elena. I was 35 years old, engaged to a man named Marcus, and I genuinely believed, right up until that moment, that I had finally gotten the thing I'd spent my 20s chasing. The ring. The shared address. The future with a name and a date attached to it. We'd moved in together only 3 months earlier, into a 2-bedroom place with big windows and a kitchen. I'd fallen in love with the second the realtor opened the door. I had been so happy. That's the part that still catches in my throat. I had been so genuinely, stupidly happy. I come from a family of strong women. My mother is an executive. She claws her way through boardrooms for a living and has never once apologized for taking up space. My father respects her the way you respect a force of nature. And growing up, I watched the two of them treat each other like partners in the truest sense of the word. It was just me and my sister, and we were raised to believe that we were equal to anyone, that our voices mattered, that nobody got to make us feel small. So I want you to hold on to that picture of me, because it matters later. I was not a woman who was supposed to put up with anything. And yet there I was, about to learn how easily a person can talk themselves into accepting the unacceptable when they're afraid of being alone. It started with a broken laptop. That's the absurd, mundane truth of it. My work computer had finally given up, the screen flickering, the fan screaming like it was trying to take off, and my company told me they have to send it in for repair and ship me a replacement in a few days. Marcus, generous as he could be when it cost him nothing, offered me his MacBook so I could keep working from home. "Use it as long as you need, babe," he said, kissing the top of my head on his way out the door. I remember thinking how lucky I was. I actually remember that thought, word for word. How lucky I was. What Marcus forgot, or maybe never thought about, because men like him rarely think they'll get caught, was that his text messages synced to that MacBook. His iPhone and his laptop both lit up with every message he received. So I was sitting there, halfway through a spreadsheet, a mug of coffee at my elbow and a podcast playing softly in the background, when a notification slid down from the top corner of the screen. A name, Sixite, and a little gray preview of a message I couldn't quite read. I want to be honest about what happened in my chest in that moment, because I think a lot of people imagine that the discovery is the dramatic part. It isn't. The dramatic part is the half-second of denial before you click. The part where your brain offers you 100 innocent explanations. A coworker with a funny nickname. A spam contact. A joke between friends. I sat there and I let myself believe for about 3 seconds that this was nothing. And then I clicked. Because I'm my mother's daughter and we don't look away. The conversation that opened up on that screen went back months. Months. I scrolled and scrolled, and the scroll bar barely moved, and my stomach dropped lower with every flick of my finger. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't a few stray, inappropriate comments. It was a full, sustained, sexual relationship conducted entirely in text. Photos. Hers is the kind of photos that made my face burn even as my eyes filled. Conversations that happened during the workday, every day, while I was at my desk in this very apartment, thinking we were building a life. There were pet names. There were promises. There was an intimacy in it that was almost worse than the explicit parts, because the explicit parts were just bodies, and the intimacy was his heart, and he had given it to someone else. And then I found the message from the day before. The one where he told her, casually like he was commenting on the weather, that when he was having sex with me, he was thinking about her. I read it 3 times. I read it until the words stopped looking like words. My fiancé, the man who had helped me the night before and told me he loved me. The man whose ring was sitting on my finger as I held that laptop. He had been inside that bed with me and somewhere else entirely. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I think people expect that, and maybe some part of me wishes I had, because at least it would have been honest. Instead, I went very, very quiet. I have learned, over the years, that the quiet is the dangerous part of me. The quiet is where my mother lives. I sat there and I made a decision with the cold, clinical part of my brain that takes over when the rest of me is on fire. I was going to protect myself first and feel later. Because this was not the first time. 2 years earlier, before the ring, before the apartment, I had seen some texts on his phone. Nothing as damning as this. A few messages, a tone that didn't sit right, a name I didn't recognize. And when I'd asked him about it, he hadn't just denied it. He had made me feel insane. He had looked at me with this wounded, baffled expression and asked if I was okay, if I'd been under a lot of stress, if maybe I needed to talk to someone. He turned my legitimate concern into evidence of my own instability so smoothly that I had ended up apologizing to him. Apologizing for noticing. I had spent 2 years believing I'd overreacted, when the truth was that I'd been right all along and he'd simply gotten better at hiding it. So I knew, sitting at that table, exactly what would happen if I confronted him without proof. He would deny it. He would gaslight me. He would make me the unstable one again. And I was not going to give him that gift twice. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photo I could stomach capturing, every timestamp. And then I emailed them to myself, to an account he didn't have access to, and I watched the little sent confirmation appear and felt something in me harden into resolve. Evidence. Whatever else happened, he would never again be able to tell me I imagined it. I gave myself a few hours. I'm proud of that, honestly. I didn't react in the heat of the moment. I finished my workday, or pretended to, my eyes sliding over the same spreadsheet cell for an hour while my mind ran in circles. I made dinner. I let the smell of garlic fill the kitchen I loved. And the whole time, this strange calm settled over me. The calm of someone who already knows how a story ends and is just waiting for the other character to finish their lines. He came home around 6, all smiles, smelling like the cologne I'd bought him for his birthday. "Something smells amazing," he said, and I remember the way my hand tightened around the wooden spoon. We ate. We talked about nothing. And then, when the plates were cleared, I set my phone on the table between us, the screenshots already pulled up, and I said, "I need you to tell me about sexy tea." The color didn't even drain from his face. That's what got me. He didn't panic. He didn't go pale. He just exhaled like a man who'd been mildly inconvenienced and leaned back in his chair. And then he said the thing that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, "It's not cheating. It's no different than watching porn. I'm not actually having sex with her." What would you have done in this situation? Let me know in the comments, because I have honestly wondered 100 times whether my reaction was right. In that moment, I just stared at him, because the audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of comparing months of an emotional and sexual relationship with a real woman, a woman he'd met, a woman he'd named, a woman he thought about while he was in bed with me, to passively watching strangers on a screen, it short-circuited something in my brain. "Poor doesn't text you back," I said. My voice was so level it scared me. "Poor doesn't know your name. Porn isn't a person you met at a networking event." And that's when he told me the rest. That he'd met her at a conference pre-pandemic. That they kept in touch. That she had started sending hot photos, and one thing led to another. As though he were a leaf carried helplessly along by a current, and not a grown man who chose, every single day, to pick up his phone and feed a betrayal. He framed himself, as he always did, as the passive object of events. Things happened to Marcus. Marcus never did anything. And finally, only after I got loud, only after my voice cracked, and I let him see how much he'd hurt me, because he needed to see my pain before he'd offer me anything, he said he would stop talking to her. He said it the way you'd promise a child you'd think about getting them a puppy. A pacifier. A nothing. I should have left that night. I know that now. But here's the ugly truth I have to tell you, because I promised myself this story would be honest. I didn't. I went to bed in that apartment beside that man because some terrified, small part of me was still doing the math. Still wondering if I could fix it. Still whispering that maybe I couldn't do better. I lay in the dark next to him, listening to him breathe, and I hated myself for the part of me that wanted to believe him. The replacement laptop my company sent didn't arrive on schedule. It was supposed to come Saturday, but the tracking slipped to Tuesday or Wednesday. So on Monday morning, I was still using his MacBook. And maybe there was fate, or maybe it was just a shipping delay, But either way, the universe handed me the one thing I needed, a window straight into his soul, left wide open. I told myself I wasn't going to look. I really did tell myself that. I sat down to work, and I promised myself I'd stay out of his messages, that the trust was broken, but I'd at least give the weekend's promise a chance to mean something. And then, around mid-morning, the curiosity, no, not curiosity, the need to know the truth, became unbearable. I opened his messages. He'd been texting her since around 9 that morning. Not Friday, not the day of the confrontation. That morning, less than 72 hours after he'd looked me in the eye, watched me cry, and promised to cut her off, he was right back in the conversation. And it gets worse because I read the whole thread, and the timeline of it told me everything I needed to know about the man I'd almost married. Around 9, he messaged her something dutiful and sad, that he couldn't text her much anymore, that things were complicated, that he had to pull back. The responsible-sounding version of a goodbye. And then, not even an hour later, before 10 o'clock, he'd message her again to say he couldn't stand not texting her, that he missed her already, that the morning felt empty without her. He couldn't even keep his own promise to himself for 60 minutes. The man who told me he'd ended had ended nothing. He'd just added a layer of theater on top, a performance of restraint that lasted less time than my morning coffee took to go cold. And in that moment, all the math I'd been doing, the should I stay calculations, the maybe I can fix this fantasies, the maybe I can't do better fears, all of it just evaporated. It didn't feel like heartbreak. That's the thing nobody tells you. It felt like clarity. It felt like waking up. I closed the laptop, and I sat very still, and I realized that I was free, that he had just handed me the permission I'd been too scared to give myself. I didn't say a word to him. He was in the other room on a work call, his voice rising and falling in that confident, easy way he had, the voice of a man who believed the world bent to accommodate him. I went into the bedroom, and I started packing. Quietly, methodically, the way my mother taught me to do everything, folding, not throwing. I called my former roommate, a woman named Priya who'd been my anchor for years before I moved in with Marcus, and I asked her, my voice barely above a whisper, "Is my old room still available?" "It's yours," she said immediately. She didn't even ask why. She just heard in my voice and said, "Come home, Elena." I will never be able to repay her for the speed of that answer. Sometimes the whole difference between staying and leaving is whether there's a door open somewhere with your name on it. I was lucky. I had that door. I want to acknowledge that not everyone does. I'll come back to that because it matters more than almost anything else in this story. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We post news stories every day. Now, let me tell you about the part where he tried to stop me. He finished his call and walked out to find me carrying a suitcase toward the front door, and the mask slipped on so fast it was almost impressive. The wounded confusion, the baffled innocence. "Elena, what are you doing? What's going on? Babe, talk to me." He planted himself between me and the door, hands spread wide, his face a perfect mask of a man who genuinely did not understand. "You're completely overreacting. I don't even know what you think happened. You're taking this way overboard." And there it was. The same move from 2 years ago, the gaslighting, the rewriting of reality in real time, the attempt to make me the crazy one. But here's the difference between the Elena of 2 years ago and the Elena standing in that doorway. This time, I had receipts. This time, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't try to get him to admit anything. I just looked at him, this man I had loved, and I felt a great calm distance open up between us, like watching someone on the far shore of a river you've already crossed. I picked up my bag and I walked past him, and he kept talking the whole time about how I was being dramatic, about how nothing happened, about how I was throwing away our future over a misunderstanding. I got in my car. I drove to Prius. And when I got there, when I carried my bags up to the room that had been mine before I ever knew his last name, I sat down on the bed and I took out my phone. I didn't send him a long message. I didn't list his crimes. I didn't pour out my heart. I just sent him one photograph, a screenshot of his text conversation from that very morning. The 9 o'clock, "I can't text you much anymore." And the 9:50 something, "I can't stand not texting you." Time stamped. Undeniable. The whole performance of his fake goodbye and his real surrender, side by side, in his own words. And then I turned my phone face down and I let myself, finally, after 3 days of holding all in, cry. The apologies came in a flood, the way they always do. Within the hour he was calling, texting, leaving voicemails that ranged from furious to broken to pleading. He was sorry. He'd made a mistake. He'd get help. He'd never do it again. He couldn't live without me. He'd cut her off for real this time. And oh, the bitter laugh that one pulled out of me because I had watched in real time exactly how long for real this time lasted with him. About 50 minutes, give or take. I told him no. I told him I was done. Not just over this, but over all of it. Over the cheating I could now prove, and over the cheating 2 years ago that he'd convinced me I'd imagined, and over the fundamental truth I could no longer unsee. That he was a manipulative man who would always put his own wants above my dignity, and who would always make me feel insane for having needs at all. I think, if I'm honest, I had always known. I'd just been too afraid to look directly at it. And the wildest part is how light I felt once I did. People talk about heartbreak like it's only pain, but nobody warns you that leaving the right person at the wrong time and the wrong person at the right time can feel like setting down a backpack full of bricks you forgot you were carrying. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought the story was over. Woman discovers betrayal. Woman leaves. Woman heals. But a few days after I moved out, I got a message I never in a million years expected. It was from his mother. Now, I should tell you that I liked his mother. Genuinely. She was warm in that bustling, feed everyone, fuss over everyone way, and she'd always made me feel welcome at their enormous family gatherings. Marcus is one of 6 children, you have to understand, from a big, traditional, tightly woven family, so different from my own quiet household of strong women. She asked if we could have a phone call. I wasn't sure how much Marcus had told her, and part of me braced for an ambush, a guilt trip, a mother defending her son. But I liked her, and I thought she deserved the courtesy of a conversation. So I agreed. I sat down on Priya's couch with a cup of tea, and I answered her call, expecting, I think, an apology on his behalf. My son is a fool. A little maternal solidarity. That is not what I got. She started gently. She wasn't condoning what he'd done, she said. She wanted me to know that. She wasn't condoning what his father had done, either. And that word, that little admission slipped in so casually, made my stomach turn because of course his father had done the same. And then she said it, the thing I will never forget, in this soft, almost loving tone, like she was passing down a treasured family recipe. Sometimes as women, we have to put up with our men cheating. It's just a part of life. I sat there with the phone against my ear and my tea going cold, and I could not, for a moment, make my mouth work. She kept going. She told me that Marcus was a good provider, that he would always take care of me, take care of any children we might have, give us a comfortable life. And that sometimes, in exchange for a man who provides, a woman simply has to put up with some things she may not like. She was offering it to me as wisdom, as a gift, as the deal she herself had made and survived and apparently wanted to hand down to me like an heirloom. Endure the betrayal, and in return, you'll be kept. I have thought so much about that woman since that phone call, about what her life must have been, about a young version of her decades ago, maybe sitting on her own couch, getting this same speech from her own mother or her own mother-in-law, learning to fold herself smaller and smaller until put up with it became the shape of her whole life. There was no cruelty in her voice. That's what haunts me. She believed she was helping me. She believed she was teaching me how to be happy, by which she meant how to be quiet, how to be provided for, how to look the other way for 40 years and call a marriage. And in that moment, every strong woman who raised me stood up in my spine. My mother, who would, I am certain, literally end my father if he ever did a fraction of what Marcus did. My grandmother, my sister. I thought about what it would mean to say yes to this. Not just to Marcus, but to this entire inheritance of endurance. This whole lineage of women taught that their worth was measured by how much they could swallow. And I thought about a daughter I might one day have, sitting on a couch somewhere in the future, being handed the same poisonous recipe. I'm sorry, I said, and I was surprised by how steady I sounded. But this conversation is over. And I hung up, gently, not in anger, in something closer to grief and clarity and a strange, fierce love for every woman who'd ever been told to make herself small. That phone call didn't break my heart. It sealed the deal. If I'd had a single lingering doubt about leaving Marcus, his mother had just incinerated it. Because now I understood where he came from. Now I understood that he genuinely, in his bones, did not believe he had done anything wrong. Because in the world that raised him, he hadn't. A man providing while a woman endures was simply the natural order. He wasn't a monster who knew he was hurting me and did it anyway. In some ways, that would have been easier. He was something more ordinary and more sad. A man who had been taught that my pain was the price of his comfort, and who had never once questioned the math. I talked to my own mother that night for a long time, the kind of phone call that goes until the sky outside starts to lighten. I told her everything. The texts, the confrontation, the 50-minute promise, the mother-in-law's speech. And when I finished, there was a silence on the line, and then she said, in the voice I've heard her use to dismantle entire boardrooms, "You did exactly right. And if your father ever pulled something like that, they'd never find a body." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that has tears in it, and I felt the last of the weight lift off my chest. I had come from strength. I had almost forgotten it. And I would not be the link in the chain where the strength ran out. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel like myself again. The apartment with the beautiful kitchen became just a place I used to live. The ring went into a drawer, and then into a box, and then out of my life entirely. And one day, scrolling on my phone, I came across a stranger's post. A man describing how he discovered his wife had been secretly messaging her ex, and how everyone in the comments was twisting themselves in knots trying to figure out whether it counted as cheating, whether it was really that bad, whether he was overreacting. And it hit me all over again, that familiar sick feeling, because I recognized it. The minimizing, that it's not really cheating. The desperate search for a definition that lets the betrayer off the hook. That's the moment I decided to tell my own story. Not for sympathy. I'd already healed more than I expected to. I told it because I kept thinking about all the people out there sitting where I'd sat, holding a phone full of evidence, doing the terrible math, wondering if they were crazy, wondering if they could do better, wondering if it's just texting, or it's just like porn, or it's not really cheating, was a definition they were supposed to accept. And I wanted to say, as clearly as I possibly could, the problem is not you. The problem is not the woman he was texting, or the ex she was messaging, or whatever third part of your mind wants to blame so the person you love can stay innocent. The problem is the person who chose to betray you. Full stop. They don't respect you. And if they could do this, they never really did. Drop a comment below. Do you think they made the right call by walking away the moment that second betrayal came to light, instead of giving him the chance to explain? I've made my peace with my answer, but I genuinely want to know yours. Here's the thing I most want you to take from all of this. If you are a parent, if you have children watching how you let yourself be treated, please, I am begging you, do not teach them that this is what love looks like. Do not let your child grow up the way Marcus grew up, watching a parent endure betrayal in silence and calling it loyalty, until the child becomes an adult who genuinely cannot tell the difference between providing and loving, between being kept and being cherished. He didn't invent his cruelty. He inherited it. And his mother didn't invent hers either. She was handed it, the same way she tried to hand it to me. Somewhere up that chain, a woman was taught to swallow her pain, and she passed it down and down and down until it landed in my lap on a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. And I am the one who got to say, it stops here. I want to be honest about something else too, because I'd be lying if I pretended my story is everyone's. I left because I could. I had money of my own. I'd built a career the way my mother taught me to. I had a support system, a friend with an open door, and a mother 3 states away who answered on the first ring. Not everyone has that. Some people are reading this from inside a situation they cannot simply walk out of, financially or otherwise, and I refuse to stand on my pile of privilege and lecture them about strength. So if that's you, if you're trapped, if leaving isn't a door you can open today, I just want you to know that I see you. Your situation is not your fault, and your worth is not a thing that disappears just because you can't leave yet. You matter. You're not crazy. And the day may come when the door opens, and I hope with everything in me that you walk through it. As for me, I sleep easier now than I have in years. I don't lie awake doing math anymore. I don't scan a phone for clues or apologize for noticing things that are real. I think about the woman I almost became, the one who said yes to the mother-in-law's recipe, the one who folded herself smaller and smaller in a beautiful kitchen, and I feel nothing but tenderness and relief for the version of me who closed that laptop and packed that bag instead. The hardest thing I ever did was believe that I deserved better than someone who told me, to my face, that loving me felt like watching porn. But I did believe it, eventually, and believing it set me free. Everyone reading this deserves respect. Everyone reading this deserves love. The real kind, the kind that doesn't come with a price tag of silence and endurance attached. Make sure the people in your life are giving you that. And if they're not, remember what it took me 35 years and one synced MacBook to finally understand. The problem was never that I wasn't enough. The problem was that he was never going to be enough for me. And the bravest thing I ever did was stop pretending otherwise. Guys, we are inching toward 1,000 subscribers on this channel. If you're not subscribed, please consider hitting subscribe. It really helps us hit that 1,000 milestone. Thanks for sticking around.